Hey guys, let's get more news about Steelers, but first, don't forget to subscribe and leave your like. Steelers floated as possible trade suitor for WR with Russell Wilson ties. Despite hype for a significant offseason receiver acquisition, the Pittsburgh Steelers have yet to add a big-time playmaker at wideout since trading Deontay Johnson. Steelers Now's Alan Saunders argued that the team could now be waiting on a potential post-June 1 trade to make their big-time receiver addition. If that's the case, Saunders argued Seattle Seahawks wideout Tyler Lockett is a possible target. Lockett played 7 seasons in Seattle with new Steelers quarterback Russell Wilson. Lockett just restructured his deal with the Seahawks this offseason, which would make a pre-June 1 trade costly to Seattle, Saunders wrote. If they traded Lockett now, that would incur a $27.8 million dead cap hit and cost the Seahawks an additional $8.9 million in cap space on top of what is slated to cost. But if they waited until after June 1, a Lockett trade would only have a $13.9 million dead cap hit this season, while saving Seattle's cap in 2024 $5 million in room. To the Steelers, Lockett would be a bargain, with just $4.67 million in guaranteed salary and $340,000 in roster bonuses. From 2019 to 22, Lockett posted 4 consecutive 1,000-yard receiving seasons. 3 of those campaigns were with Wilson as his quarterback. With Wilson behind center, Lockett recorded more than 16 yards per reception in 2018 and 2021. The veteran receiver also posted a pair of 10-touchdown campaigns with Wilson, 2018 and 2021. In 2023, Lockett had 79 catches, 894 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns. A lot of pundits have labeled the Steelers an obvious fit for veteran receiver Tyler Boyd. Pittsburgh trading for star wideout Brandon Ayuk has been another popular rumor this offseason. But Lockett could be an even better fit for the Steelers. He's been both a possession receiver and big playmaker in his career. Lockett is more likely to be the former at this point of his career. He turns 32 in September. That should be just fine for the Steelers, as they have George Pickens, who led the NFL with 18.1 yards per reception last season. Lockett has been the perfect receiver for the Seahawks to pair with DK Metcalf, who is another freakishly athletic big play receiver. It would be a very similar role for Lockett with Pickens. Of course, Lockett's previous experience with Wilson would also be a great benefit for the Pittsburgh offense. Even if the Steelers draft a receiver, Lockett would likely slide well into the number 2 role. Pickens is currently the only wideout the Steelers have on their roster who had more than 209 receiving yards last season. The Steelers have signed veterans Van Jefferson and Quez Watkins since the Johnson trade. However, Jefferson and Watkins combined for only 351 receiving yards in 2023. The Steelers trading for Lockett makes a lot of sense on paper. But the question is whether the Seahawks will be willing to depart with him. Saunders suggested Seattle could at least be interested in hearing what Lockett is worth on the trade market. The team could see the veteran as both expendable and not a big part of their ongoing rebuild, Saunders wrote. The Seahawks used their first-round pick on Ohio State wide receiver Jaxon Smith-Njigba in 2023. He had 93 targets and for 628 yards and 4 touchdowns as a rookie. After that productive rookie season, the Seahawks could move Jaxon Smith-Njigba into the number 2 receiver role opposite Metcalf. The next big question is trade compensation. NFL teams haven't gotten a lot in return for veteran wide receivers in trades this offseason. That's good news for the Steelers. And if the trade is a post-June 1 deal, the draft compensation for Lockett will be for next year. If Lockett garners such a small return in a trade, though, it's worth wondering if such a deal will be worth it for Seattle. The Seahawks would have to want to give Smith-Njigba more opportunities to be willing to give up Lockett for a small return. Lockett also made it very clear to reporters on April 10 that he doesn't want to leave Seattle. Tyler Lockett ended his press conference by saying he doesn't want to see any more articles suggesting he be traded, wrote The Athletic's Michael Sean Dugar on X, formerly Twitter. 5 for Friday, second receiving option might already be on roster. Since the Steelers traded Deontay Johnson last month to the Carolina Panthers, there have been a lot of questions surrounding who will be the team's number 2 receiver behind George Pickens. Thing is, that player might already be on the team's roster. After a season in which Pat Freiermuth and the rest of the Steelers' tight ends were largely ignored in the passing game, combining for 62 receptions for 536 yards and 2 touchdowns, it's easy to overlook that position as being a factor in the passing game. But remember that Freiermuth caught 123 passes in 2021 and 2022, becoming just the second tight end in NFL history along with Keith Jackson to have at least 60 receptions in each of his first 2 seasons in the league. And regardless of what fantasy football analysts might say, new Steelers offensive coordinator Arthur Smith doesn't ignore the tight end position. Kyle Pitts had over 1,000 yards as a rookie, and even last season, when he was supposedly ignored, he had 53 catches for 667 yards, while Jonnu Smith also had 50 receptions for 582 yards, while they combined for 6 touchdowns. Others might point to the fact that Denver in 2023 got just 39 receptions for 362 yards and 4 touchdowns out of its tight end position, with new Steelers quarterback Russell Wilson quarterbacking most of the team's games. But nobody is going to mistake the group of Adam Troutman, Lucas Krull, Nate Adkins, Greg Dulcich and Chris Manhertz for Freiermuth and the rest of the group of tight ends the Steelers have on their roster. When Wilson has had a talented tight end, he's used him, especially in the red zone. In fact, even when Wilson didn't have great tight ends, he utilized them in the red zone. Over the course of his career with Seattle and then Denver, tight ends on those teams caught 84 touchdown passes, an average of 7 touchdown catches per season from the position. The tight end position on Wilson's teams in his 12 seasons have averaged nearly 68 receptions for 769 yards, an average of 11.3 yards per catch. And remember, for every Jimmy Graham, who played with Wilson for 3 seasons, there's also seasons where Wilson's top tight end was Zach Miller, Luke Willison, Nick Vannett or Jacob Hollister. Nothing against some of those players, but they're not as talented as Freiermuth. And with the Steelers' tight end group also including Connor Hayward, Darnell Washington, Rodney Williams and now Michael Pruitt, signed last week, the Steelers have extremely good depth at the position, as well. Freiermuth is arguably the best tight end Wilson has played with since Graham, who in 3 seasons with Wilson caught 170 passes for 2,048 yards and 18 touchdowns. Still just 25, Freiermuth also is 6 years younger than Graham was when he played his final season with Wilson. The Steelers could still add more at wide receiver this offseason, but there's a good chance that their second leading receiver will be Freiermuth, with the other tight ends also chipping in better numbers than they produced in 2023. Freiermuth is an excellent receiving threat who is just beginning to come into his own. Tight ends typically take a few years to reach their peak. And Freiermuth should be coming into his prime. Pittsburgh Steelers linked to WR with rare speed to help Russell Wilson. The Pittsburgh Steelers doubled down on finding a franchise quarterback this offseason, scooping Russell Wilson off the scrap heap and trading for Justin Fields, but might be on the cusp of adding a dynamic weapon to elevate the passing game for whichever signal caller is behind center this season. After all, there could be a legitimate quarterback competition in the Iron City this summer. George Pickens is a prolific weapon and matchup nightmare as a focal point of Pittsburgh's vertical attack, but the Steelers could be primed to add a playmaker with speed on the perimeter during the upcoming 2024 NFL Draft. Roman Wilson made the most of the limited opportunities he had to stretch the field in the confines of Michigan's offensive scheme, but at least one NFC scout believes he has untapped upside in the vertical passing game. I don't think most people realize what he would have done in a wide-open offense like Ohio State or Washington, the scout tells NFL.com of Wilson. He's got rare speed and you will see it more in the NFL when he's a bigger part of the passing game. If the Steelers go into this draft aiming to come out of it with a playmaking wide receiver, Pro Football Focus believes Wilson is an ideal fit as a top target on day 2 for Pittsburgh. New Steelers quarterback Russell Wilson would likely have flashbacks of Tyler Lockett if he were to throw passes to Wilson. The former Wolverine is an ultra-competitive downfield threat who posted a perfect 99.9 deep receiving grade last season. He also dropped only one pass among his 67 targets. And you, fan? What do you think of the situation of Roman Wilson? Leave your opinion in the comments.